wants to run a campaign for years, but makes players want to quit D&D after a couple sessions. Well, this should be good. Okay. So this one was posted by am_trick2468. Thank you for the post. It's an extra long one, so strap in, everybody. Okay. So let me start this by saying that there was a campaign that the DM had several years in the making. As in, DM had been writing and working with us on our character for years. Several other players at the table took turns running D&D one-shots or short campaigns. And also, let me first start by saying that I generally usually like this individual outside of D&D, but the way they've been running D&D has caused some friction between us, and I could tell some friction between DM and the other players as well. But let me also mention that this is a D&D campaign that features 7 players and 1 DM. I'm fully aware that those numbers can be daunting, and I think that's why people have had as much patience as they have had. Well, it's a truly grueling and unpleasant experience that has made myself and most of the players at the table talk about quitting D&D. Or at the very least breaking from the group and finding strangers to play with. As a DM, essentially just use every poor cliche tech that the DM should never do over and over. Yeah, as someone who's run campaigns with large groups, it can be very difficult. So you have to be extra patient with people and make sure that everyone's having fun because it can get kind of daunting. The DM wanted to run a campaign completely created from scratch. But DM's on Pantheon of Gods. I've tried to do this. It's very hard, I gotta say. DM's on Pantheon of Gods, Kingdoms, NPCs, etc. I thought it was a pretty cool idea at first. However, the DM made demands that my character be completely religious and obsessed with one of their gods. I wasn't a fan, but I withheld judgment and agreed. I later find out that all the players at the table seem to have been in a somewhat similar situation. Not entirely terrible, but it did set the stage for similar issues later. I feel like number one rule of DMing, in my opinion, is don't force the player to do something they don't want to do. There are things you can limit, like if certain things are overpowered, certain spells maybe don't fit with the setting. Certain races might not exist in the setting you're making, but in general, don't force the player to do something. It's one thing to say, the limit the options. It's another thing to say that you have to do something, you know. And I even tend to try not to limit options because I just feel like it's not as fun. Maybe it's just like people are here to have fun. You let them do what they want to do to some extent, And DM should have fun too. The DM should also be able to have fun, but you shouldn't force people to do something. You're already limiting somebody's character, and that's not fun, and it just makes the story less fun. I say fun a lot during these. I like that word, fun. Anyway, okay. The campaign started with us all in jail for various reasons. We meet there and come together and attempt to escape. I thought it was a cool start and a more interesting take than the typical met up in a tavern situation. We worked together and to try to come up with ways to escape the jail. I was in a campaign that had this started. Similar, but obviously the same thing. Before eventually finding out it was hopeless. Eventually, a NPC from the DM's made up Empire of the Imperium led an army and rescued us. This is actually very similar. Well, that didn't happen, but they're one of the campaigns I'm in. There's an Imperium, which is interesting. Led an army and rescued us, freeing us from the jail. We were tasked with hunting down and capturing the man who had taken over the city and thrown us in jail. Pretty interesting start, at least I thought. After capturing him, one of the players of the group, I'll just call him P, offered to assist the party upon learning that one of the players wanted information from him. Apparently, P was playing a semi-evil character that had motivation for joining the group and wanted to work cooperatively with us. Excuse me. I'm just not a fan of those chaotic evil characters, which he clearly was, but I thought I'd give him a chance. He was a warlock and he tried to torture information out of the captured trader, but his spells didn't work for reasons he didn't seem to understand. A couple members of the group taunted him for it, and I thought it had pissed him off, which would explain why he acted the way he did in the next session. But later on, when we had a private conversation about issues I had with my character, I learned this player was going through the same thing. What he told me made me realize how early on things had gone poorly in this campaign before it got really bad. Oh boy, everyone. But anyway, P was very quiet for the next couple of sessions and seemed to frequently be on his phone. I and a couple other players simply thought he was pouting about how his spells automatically failed and that another player taunted him for it. Truth be told, though, a lot of players were frequently on their phones and bored. It was more annoying to me, but I didn't care and just ignored it. The main issue I had with the campaign early on, before talking in private with this player, was that the DM's NPCs were boring and one-dimensional. They all acted exactly the same, and the DM would constantly forget their NPC name. Okay, don't call me out like this. I forget my NPC names too. I'm working on it. I'm trying to take notes, And remember the character names because sometimes people go to like stores and when you're playing a campaign where it's one giant city, there's a lot of stores and you don't always remember the names. I digress. Um, and spend tons of time flipping through notes to learn something minor about them, such as their looks or their names. The only NPCs that the DM would fully remember were the half gods, and oh boy, they were a massive problem in a whole different way. And not only that, the DM had a frequent habit of showing up and telling us they had nothing prepared due to work or because they got carried away with a video game, so expect to end early at night. We often wait for over an hour for DM to show up due to their schedule, only for DM to frequently tell us expect to end early tonight. We heard that one a lot. The worst time was when the DM came in and said that nothing was prepared because they had been playing Assassin's Creed all week, and then laughing. I remember looking around the table and noticing not a single other player had left. Well, that's annoying. I mean, I know work life schedules can be hard to balance, and that's a lot to deal with. But if you're gonna just come in and be like, haha, I don't have everything prepared, like, don't do that. That's just rude. And it's wasting your player's time. And sometimes I've come in where I've had a rough week and I haven't been able to prepare as much as I would like to. And in general, like my players have been pretty understanding about that. And I appreciate that. So just don't be a dick about it. Okay. In the campaign, that what usually happen is that there was nothing to do. Our characters would maybe talk, but it was difficult to confide with each other when we had done almost nothing with each other. The quest board was always empty, likely due to the DM not ever being prepared, and there was a little direction on what to do next. And the NPCs were all dull and uninteresting, as well as the towns themselves. A lot of the time, we would jump at the hint of any kind of adventure, only to be disappointed. You'd think the DM would throw in a simple fight here and there, and well, they did. But most of the fights ended in the first round before the enemy ever really got a turn. So not the most engaging of D&D battles either. But over these early sessions, I noticed that P started to get more and more frustrated with DM for reasons I didn't understand. He seemed to be frustrated when he seemed to be barely participating. I just thought he was an ass. Eventually, he apparently asked DM if he could change characters, and he was allowed to. He changed to a sorcerer or some kind of magic user. It was really weird, and I personally felt it just made things awkward. However, we met up one day for reasons unrelated to the campaign, and, well, after talking about other stuff, I confided in him that I didn't like the campaign so far and how my character was forced to be a puppet for a god I never wanted to serve, as well as the constant lack of preparation. And I was frustrated because I spent years making this character. What, years? Holy shit. Okay, anyway. And it's all been wasted on a dull campaign with a DM that doesn't give a shit. That's when he informed me. I mean, alright, look, the DM doesn't seem that great, but, like, years on a character just, like, just screams, like, uh-oh, we got a badass over here. Like, chill out, okay? Like, just, like, find another group. Okay. I don't know. It just seems very prima donna. That's when he informed me of a couple of things that, all right, not that I don't want to like crap on the OP too much here, but just like let's give it a rest here. That's when he informed me a couple of things that A, changed my perspective on what was going on, and B, prepped me for a couple of things that would happen later exactly as he said it would. Honestly, the only reason I'm bringing it up is because his predictions were spot on. He informed me that he had worked with the DM on creating his character and also forced to worship those gods, but in a different way. P said that his character was meant to have a love/hate relationship with the gods he was working with anytime he tried to do something evil. His character would take damage. However, he said that the DM had just randomly changed it in the middle of the game to being that not only does he take damage, but now his spells just don't work. Well, that's just stupid. And he said the DM did it not just for things that were evil, but also simple or creative things. He said that a lot of time he was on the phone wasn't because he wasn't engaged, but because he was texting the DM to see if he can try casting a spell to help with the situation. And the DM often said, "No, it doesn't work." Well, that's that. Well, yeah, okay. Now I see why this guy's pissed off. Like this, that's just stupid. Like why? Like this guy just can't even play D&D. Like yeah, I mean like evil characters can be. This guy didn't seem like he's causing a problem. I mean torture was pretty bad, but comparatively, it's just annoying. That's really annoying. Even for simple things, right? So that's just he didn't want to get embarrassed in front of the group by being surprised by the rule change again. So he stuck texting the DM to see if any of his spells would work before actually trying anything. He even showed me some of the text. He told me it was the most miserable D&D experience of his life, and he felt like an actual prisoner with no power or freedom to do anything. I kind of understood why he was getting frustrated, but that's not important. What he said next was interesting. He said that before this campaign, he knew how DM was a huge fan of Greek mythology and self-insert characters. He said he knew it from reading the DM's fanfics, and how DM had run some D&D shorts in the past, and for me slash us to expect to play second fiddle to basically DMPC half uh, gods and the pantheon of the DM's game, as well as the DM would make us be audiences to the successes, while we essentially got to do nothing. At first, I thought he was just venting his frustration, but no, almost word for word what he said came true. And then it happened. We met a half god in the main campaign. We had already met one in the session 0, and yeah, I had played DMPCs again. Always hate that. I had played second fiddle to that person, but simply thought that since it was session 0, that was okay. But in our main campaign, we started meeting lots of half gods, and every time we did something, they just embarrassed us by doing something better. P seemed happier now that he was a magic user class and no longer a warlock. I can't remember which class he turned into. But my mood got worse as what he said repeatedly came true. One of our players would win a fighting green pit, a half god would come in as a main attraction to make what we all did look like a baby play. We fought in a tournament held year round and won it. Speaking of which, the DM had 7 other teams and literally did a play-by-play of each round of all 7 teams and made us sit for hours listening to her explain how each round of combat went. Not exaggeration. Maybe a little over an hour of the session was us fighting in the tournament, while all the other hours were us listening to her tell us how the other teams were doing on a play-by-play basis. I literally thought myself and all the other players' brains would turn to mush. But after the tournament, we were forced to watch a half god win the main attraction while we all got to enjoy the reward of watching the character fight. Then we thought something interesting was happening, where an assassination attempt happened on the Empress of the Imperium, who was in the stands with us watching the half god fight. But it was just a cutscene for the DM to tell us how the half god and Empress single handedly solved the whole issue. And we were forced to just watch the whole thing. One of our players, I won't say which, tried to forcefully get involved in the adventure that was happening in the cutscene, but was nearly instantly incapacitated by the half god whose side we were on. Pete tried to help him, but all his spells instantly failed, it seems like, for one reason or another. None of the rest of the party really got involved due to how it was clear this meant to be a long cutscene. Over the next couple sessions, we were allowed to do nothing as the city was locked down, and I do mean nothing except listen to conversations between the half-god NPCs and the Empress handling the whole assassination and retention war. We had absolutely zero involvement, except to be a party to listening to their exploits and them gloat. When it came time for our turn to actually get a word and to talk to the Empress, one of our players revealed that he was a prince from a fallen nation. But the problem was that no one had heard of his nation, and we weren't that close yet. I could tell that player was very bummed out by how his big reveal went over real quick without much impact, as the Empress kind of moved the conversation quickly along to topics about the assassination, and provided us with zero information, zero quests, zero progress towards anything, answered zero questions, etc. We left with literally nothing to do. Damn, this is a long post. Strap in. So I kind of get why this person's was kind of like being a little aggressive, because this seems pretty shitty, you know. So like you prepared, like you're not prepared for the players, but when your big DMPCs wants to do something, you have like a full on tournament fight, which is not fun. We traveled randomly after that when the lockdown in the city finally ended. No direction or goal, really. Eventually, however, one of our players received a random message about how their grandparent was dying. However, the issue was that by this point, it was 2 a.m. real life in the morning of us doing literally nothing but listening to cutscenes or wandering aimlessly. And then the player affected in question was a player who often became exhausted by a certain hour due to him saying that he had a specific schedule from work. Fair enough, it was 2 a.m. in the morning, so when the messenger arrives, he didn't really want to do a quest focused on him, and he was exhausted, and preferred someone else on the spotlight. But the DM was insistent. We were forced to do this player's quest. Honestly, most of us just jumped on it for something to do, even if said player wanted to take a back seat to it. However, DM would not let us try to solve the riddle of the quest or advance the story, except for the exhausted player. Frustrations rose up between them, and DM openly began mocking and chastising the player for being so exhausted and unengaged. DM had a habit of mocking players at the table who weren't engaged. For example, there's a female player of our group who misses a lot of days due to personal reasons. DM openly hates this player and frequently insults her when she is not there. Rather rude and petty insults, to be honest. Truth be told, I didn't like the female player missing so much at first either. But after seeing how DM constantly comes in unprepared, with absolutely nothing for us to do, it seems quite silly to be angry at another player for not showing up for these sessions where they miss bugger all anyways. Oh, they must be British. Maybe. Who knows? And female player had kind of grown to me during a side campaign we did where she was really engaged. I later learned that the reason she missed so much also had a lot to do with how boring the campaign with DM was and how unprepared DM frequently was, as female player didn't miss a single session of the side campaign ran by another player. Our most recent session involved us doing nothing for several hours real time except walking, literally walking to a destination. And no, I don't mean walking through dangerous or exotic areas or coming across interesting events on travel. No, I literally mean just walking. DM would explain that the weather was rainy or sunny, that we would need to roll to find suitable places for beds, roll for lookouts, which nothing ever came from that, and just walk. For almost a week, something that could have been done in 2 minutes after you guys travel across the land of X for about a week before arriving at your destination. Nothing of interest happens in the time. Our entire Saturday was us just walking. Oh boy. I lost it at that, to be honest. DM hadn't said that night that they hadn't had anything prepared, but it was clear that it was just another case where, yeah, they didn't have anything prepared. I talked to P about how frustrated I was, and we talked about our worries about what was going to happen. At first, I thought DM would simply realize how bored everyone was and stop their campaign so we could actually get someone else at a DM spot. But P said that it was just not going to happen. P said the far more likely scenario was just that people would stop wanting to come, like the female player, and people would just eventually stop. Period. Would stop. Oh my god. I lost my place again. Would just stop eventually. Would just stop eventually. Period. And once again, I can tell that he is right. P stated that if DM were willing to stop when they could tell everyone was bored, they wouldn't spend over a dozen sessions showing up unprepared and still repeatedly continuing to DM anyways. He suggested that maybe we suggest to DM that DM does every other Saturday so that other players can have a shot at DMing. But that seemed way too asshole as a thing to do to the DMs, and so I disagreed. At this point, I'm not. I don't even know. Now, though, it really does seem that like most players are bored out of their wits and have lost most of their passion for D&D. I have expect players to start dropping in a day now, just as P said. Surprised a couple haven't, to be honest. I'm surprised this person hasn't left, honestly. Like P, who always talked about quitting, but I know he loves D&D, so you could tell from the other campaigns. He said he doesn't want to give it up yet, but he's on the verge. So am I, to be honest. I'm not sure how much more of this I can take, but I'm really not the type of person to openly confront a DM about how bad this is going. I was kind of hoping P would, but he said he would mean nothing coming from him, having changed characters already. It would just seem like he's whining too much, especially if no one else said anything. But I certainly don't want to say anything to the DM. I've talked to a couple other players, and all of them are miserable too, and no one wants to say anything to DM. I'm not sure what to do, honestly. I really just hope DM will wake up one day and realize they need to step down, so none of us has to say anything. But Peace Day would never happen. The players are just going to start quitting before that happens. I don't want to lose D&D, but I really don't want to be the one who confronts D&D over this. I said they're not a bad person, at least on D&D, but I don't know what to do. I mean, here's the thing. And this is coming from someone I don't like confrontation at all. I'm very bad at it, which is funny because I want to go to law school. But you have the situation. At some point, you're just gonna have to, you know, suck it up and just like get a bunch of players and be like, hey, when nobody's having fun, you know, or maybe say it less dickish than that, but we're not having a good time. Like you always keep showing up unprepared, and I'm sure you could be a great DM if you didn't. If you showed up prepared, if you had something to do. But as of right now, everyone's just not having fun, and that's just kind of the point where you just have to say that, like or just leave, either quit or find another group, or you have to just bug up and do it. Um, so like, yeah, the DM might be bad, but you as players do have a responsibility to be like, if something is going bad, like this bad, and it's gonna like ruin D&D for people, you have to say something. I think maybe you can get someone else who wants to do it, and I know you said none of them want to do it, but somebody has to at some point. You know, so that's just my takeaway. Yeah. Um. Yeah, pretty much everyone is saying here. You just gotta do it. You just gotta say it. You're done. You just gotta be done with it. Okay, I will be right back. I just need to drink. I really need a drink of water. Um, I'll be